Important doesn't mean good. I can already hear 1,000 collective, "Oh, come on," from viewers thinking I'm setting things up for a negative review of You Can't Do That on Television. But stick with me here, because it's a good philosophy to internalize. Something's importance, in any context, does not denote its actual quality. You'd be surprised how many people conflate historically important with of good quality and not problematic. They feel they must defend anyone being critical of a work that is, objectively speaking, a critical part of media history. And if they grew up with that thing, are nostalgic for that thing, then their defense will be even more excessive. One of the goals of Knacks is to knock those defenses down a few pegs, to strip away the nostalgia goggles and give each of these works a fresh perspective, and in kind, a fresh criticism. I'm about to put You Can't Do That on Television under a real microscope, but for anyone who thinks I don't appreciate the show's importance in television history, yes, this was the show that saved Nickelodeon. Yes, the channel would eventually build its entire ethos around this show. It'll be the most important show in Nickelodeon's history until we get to Double Dare, and this will always be true. This is an objective truth. And no, this isn't a wholly negative review of You Can't Do That on Television. It's going to lean overall positive, but this will be a warts and all look at the show. So with that in mind, this video is brought to you by Patreon. Patreon, the fresh maker.
Hi, this is a totally new kind of television program. It's made for ordinary Canadian kids by ordinary Canadian kids. We're all new to television, so we're still trying to find our way around the studio. Anything can happen, and probably will. Come on, John, this must be the place. Look, Kevin, we're on television. Oh, boy, I like it. Hi, girls. Hi, Mom.
You Can't Do That on Television was a 10-season, 144-episode children's comedy series that aired between 1979 and 1990. The format was simple. Every episode had a theme based around a subject a young person might deal with, like bullying, popularity, jealousy, things like that. A rotating cast of child performers would act out comedy skits that were in some way related to that theme. The show also had 2 adult actors, Liz Mallia and Abby Hagyard, who played most of the adult characters. Common reoccurring segments include the firing squad, where a kid would outwit the El Capitan and get out of their execution.
Ready? Aim!
Wait a minute! Stop the execution!
What?
What's your favorite type of music?
Oh, I would say the sounds of rifles firing. Ready? Aim!
Well, wait a minute!
What?
You can't really hear it from where you're standing.
Can't hear it from where I'm standing. Are you kidding? That's a very loud firing squad.
I mean, to get the full quadraphonic effect, you have to stand where the sound converges, and that is right on this post.
Really?
Oh, you bet. It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Hey, I got to hear this. Could we change places?
Well, I don't know, you know.
Come on, please. Please.
Okay, but just this once.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay. No, I give you here like this.
Yeah, okay, that's...
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Amigos, ready, aim, fire!
Well, how'd it sound?
Beautiful. Like angels' voices. No.
Barth's Burgers, where children visit a disgusting burger joint that's clearly not up to health code standards.
Barf should have some students working here to improve his service. Barf has lots of students here. Really? Well, yeah, he gets a new student every day. You're pulling my leg. Well, how can we never see them then? Who do you think's in the burgers?
I heard that.
The Preverts, a dysfunctional family consisting of an airhead 50s housewife and a disgustingly slobbish father who makes Homer Simpson look like Don Draper, and also he's a senator.
I want to spend the rest of my life with him.
Oh, Lisa, I know exactly how you feel, dear. It was love at first sight when I met your father.
As well as many scenes taking place in quote-unquote normal settings like the classroom, detention, the doctor's office, the arcade, places not unfamiliar for a child. Sometimes these settings would host the opposite sketches, where the opposite of a real-world scenario would play out.
There's a rumor going around that you're going to raise your prices.
Oh, that is an ugly rumor, because I am not only not going to raise my prices, in fact, from now on, all these games are free.
Oh, Cliff, I just bought $10 worth of quarters that I was just dying to stick in one of these machines.
No, absolutely free from now on.
Free?
Oh, pay. No. I will not accept your money.
These skits were intercut with scenes where the children, out of character, would discuss the show's episode and deal with the antagonistic nature of Ross, the production manager. The most memorable and charismatic of these kids would serve as the role of host, who would address the camera and introduce the episode.
Oh, hi, and welcome to You Can't Do That on Television. As you may have guessed, this week's show is about fashion. You know, all these people in Paris and London and New York try to tell you what you're going to wear every day, whether you like it or not.
There were also the locker segments where the kids would pop their heads out of lockers and tell each other really groan-worthy jokes.
Hey, Adam. Yeah, Dougie? What kind of summer job did you have? Well, I started a moving company. How'd it work out? Well, this kid I had working for me, he managed to break everything he got his hands on. So every dollar I made, there was $1 in damages. So in other words, you broke even. Get it? Broke even? Get it. Yeah.
One of the show's trademarks was its messy humor. It wasn't uncommon for kids to get a pie in the face or get some paint thrown on them, but there were also these keywords that, if a cast member said them, would result in that cast member getting certain substances dumped on their head. For example, if someone said water, they would get a bucket of water dumped on them, even if it's in the middle of a skit.
What are the 4 natural elements of the universe? Oh. Lisa.
Earth.
Right. That's one. Kevin. Air. Yeah, that's right. That's 2. Christine.
Fire.
Right. And now, Vanessa. Can you tell me what the 4th element is?
Yeah, but I'm not going to.
Well, Vanessa, either you tell me what the 4th element is, or you tell me you don't know.
Well, either way, I get something dumped on me. Okay, water.
Oh, it's moments like these that make teaching worthwhile.
But most famously, whenever someone said the phrase, "I don't know," they would get hit with a stream of neon green slime.
We can form a band.
That's a great idea.
Oh, right.
I mean, we can all be in it. Okay, what do we call it?
Beats me.
No, I don't really like the sound of that. Adam, you have any ideas? I'm thinking. No, Adam, that's too intellectual. Alanna, you must have a good idea.
I don't know.
Alistair, you did that on purpose. Now I will hate you.
No, Alanna, no, really, it didn't have anything to do with me. I just forgot to tell you that on this show you can't say, "I don't know," or you'll get slimed.
The show originated in Canada and aired on CJOH-TV in the Ottawa area as a live hour-long community program. When Nickelodeon picked up the rights for the show in 1981, it changed to a half-hour pre-recorded show. Nickelodeon would start co-producing the show in 1982, and it became the first huge success for the channel.
This week on You Can't Do That on Television, Moose and the gang look at medicine, rules and regulations, and the world of the future. Watch You Can't Do That on Television Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. And again at 7 Eastern, 4 Pacific. You Can't Do That on Television? Only on Nickelodeon.
The show's green slime would become one of Nickelodeon's trademarks, and getting slimed still happens today. So how did You Can't Do That on Television come to be? Well, it took a much longer road than you might expect.
Rockstar? Oh, come on, that was really bad. I think the writers on this program should show a little ambition and write some funny stuff. For a change.
Right on! In 1973, producer/writer/director Roger Damon Price made his big television breakout with the science fiction series The Tomorrow People, an ITV show made to rival the BBC's Doctor Who. However, while Price was interested in science fiction, it wasn't his genre of choice. With the success of The Tomorrow People, Price was finally allowed the leverage to pursue his passion, namely, sketch comedy starring children. And he didn't just make one of these, oh no. Price was constantly starting over and revising his ideas throughout the 1970s. Before the version of You Can't Do That on Television that everyone came to know and love, Price created 5 different shows that could be read as early drafts, each one bringing the concept a little closer to the famous Nickelodeon show. So let's see how this idea evolved over the years.
Listen, what do you want to do then?
Oh, I'd like to be a drummer in a pop group.
A drummer in a pop group?
Yeah.
Have you got any qualifications? I mean, what qualifications have you got?
Oh, I can play the drums.
No, I mean, have you got any CGEs or FBIs or anything?
No.
You haven't got any?
No,
you see,
sorry,
these days you must have pieces of paper. Well, it's no good, you see, it's no good.
One day, Roger Price was speaking with an executive at Thames and suggested a sketch show using untrained kids from Anna Shearer's stage school doing comedy scenes. "You must be joking," exclaimed the executive, and the show was born. In 1968, actress and theater reporter Anna Shearer opened up her own after-school drama school in North London with classes for children, teens, and adults. Focusing on improv, the theater was a pretty big success, gaining 70 pupils in its first week and 1,000 pupils by 1975. In 1973, the Ann Shearer Theater was featured in a segment of a children's magazine program called Magpie. This caught the eye of Roger Price, who pitched an idea of taking some of the more talented pupils from Shearer's classes and casting them in a children's sketch show similar in format to the hit American sketch show Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. The show scooped up a lot of young actors who would go on to have pretty extensive careers, including Pauline Quirk and Linda Robson, who would go on to be a well-known actress duo throughout several projects. This was also Price's introduction to Flintlock, an upcoming young pop band who would sing songs during the show and occasionally act in the skits, especially the young drummer, Mike Holloway. You Must Be Joking doesn't resemble You Can't Do That on Television too much. The older teenage cast and the emphasis on musical numbers didn't really carry, but it did have a few similarities. Like You Can't Do That on Television, You Must Be Joking had a single adult, in this case Jim Bowen, who would play all the adult male roles. More than that, though, was the emphasis of taking normal kids and giving them acting training. Kids who weren't professional child actors, but nonetheless had been taught classes. Through his experience with these drafts, Roger Price learned to deliberately avoid professional child actors, partially for some sake of authenticity, but also because he didn't want stage parents coming in and interfering with the creative process. This led to parents being interviewed along with the kids to make sure that they were the right kind of parents. When we started looking for new kids, we always arranged it so that at the final call, the parents were entertained with refreshments in the boardroom by some of the kids who were already on the show. Ostensibly, this was so that the new parents could ask any questions they wanted to of the established kids. In fact, it was so that the kids already on the show could screen the parents. Even the best kids in the world would have been passed over if the parents had lamentably failed their part of the audition. But having your child performers go in completely untrained would probably be a disaster, so as soon as a kid got cast, it was off to the show's drama coach, Carol Hay, who, like Anna Shearer before her, had an after-school drama class, and like You Must Be Joking, some of the cast members were pulled from the class itself. I did not audition. Carol Hay was my 4th grade teacher, and somehow I ended up in her drama class she was teaching outside of school. Roger Price came into the class and would choose children to put on the show. It still baffles me, but somehow I ended up on it. For a long time.
Thames Television proudly presents Pauline's Quirk, starring Flintlock, with John Somerton, Jamie Stone, Bill Rice, Derek Pascoe, and Mike Holloway. Also, with Linda Robson, Nuala Conwell, special guest star Ali Bongo, and yours truly, Philip Elsmore.
And?
And what?
Look, you've announced a lot of names, but ain't you left one out?
Mm-hmm. Who?
Me, you stupid twit.
Oh, you! No, you haven't been forgotten, Pauline.
Well, get on with it, then.
Oh, yes. And the star of your show, Pauline Quirk.
I should have known.
The big breakout star of You Must Be Joking was Pauline Quirk, a then 16-year-old actress from London. After You Must Be Joking closed up shop, Roger Price was kicked to basically pitch the same show again, only this time with Quirk in the lead. Flintlock was still there, doing their thing, and a lot of the episodes focused on how the girls in the audience loved Flintlock, so much so that there was a subplot that spanned multiple episodes about the kids of Flintlock making a nude poster of themselves. And boy, would it be naughty to show that on television, right, 12-year-old girls in the audience?
Today's the day we're going to see the full-length version of the poster showing Flintlock with nothing on.
Except our socks.
Now, you did bring it, lads, didn't you? I mean, you brought it this time.
Yes, but, Pauline.
Yeah.
Are you sure it's okay? I mean, this is supposed to be a children's
Look,
programme.
don't worry, I've got it all under control. Just show me the poster, please! Show me it!
Yeah, so that's weird. Mike Holloway would, of course, be added to the cast of the Tomorrow People, and at some point after that, Roger Price's tolerance for young pop stars took a nosedive. When You Can't Do That on Television came around, Price made sure that it was not a singing and dancing show, which is amusing, as one of the most well-known bits of You Can't Do That on Television trivia is that a young Alanis Morissette was part of the cast for 5 episodes. Not letting this talented young singer sing in a show became a point of order for Price. I did not let Alanis Morissette sing on You Can't Do That on Television. If I did have the kids sing, there was a real danger one or more of them would become a pop star, a la Justin Bieber, as had happened with some of the British kids in my stable. And that creates all manners of problems, not the least of which is security and crowd control, and record companies and concerts and managers, and it all takes away their time and attention from the TV show. Probably the best thing I did for Alanis was not have her sing on the show. Pauline's Quirks was a step closer to You Can't Do That on Television's messiness. It wasn't a regular thing, but when they went in hard, especially in this sketch where Pauline Quirk plays a supposedly clumsy waitress that dumps green soup and water all over Flintlock. Pauline Quirk also mirrors the host role that You Can't Do That on Television would implement, in how they both lead the sketches, but also because they're often the butt of the jokes, a role nobody else in the show seems to respect. The first and most well-known of the hosts of You Can't Do That on Television was Christine Moose McGlade, and there's a lot of parallels between her role and Quirk's role in this show, not the least of which are mean jokes about weight.
You have got a boyfriend, haven't you, Pauline?
Oh, yeah. No, but he's a right nerk, though, on my life.
Honestly, he's making me so nervous. I'm losing weight. Have you noticed? Look.
No, where? Oh, no, I can't do it. It's a good thing I saved myself in time. Boy, another chocolate cake binge would have meant another 5 pounds. Oh, I wish I was thin.
I'm sorry, but I missed that last part.
I said I wish I was thinner.
Thinner. And so you shall be.
The unfairy godmother strikes again.
The fat jokes didn't make sense with Christine McLeod because she was tiny. It was like, what the heck? There's just too much that's happened in the world in connection with teenage girls being afraid of being fat, and I don't think we need to add to that.
You know, I don't think I'll ever understand why you girls need so much different makeup stuff.
Oh, it's just to make me look pretty.
Pretty. You think there's enough there?
But if you think that's cynical, oh, you haven't seen anything yet.
ITV came under sharp protective day, accused of trying to save money by employing an increasing number of children on cheap wages. This point was denied by an official ITV spokesman.
Independent television is not trying to save money and increase profits by employing children. So there.
We're getting a lot closer to the formula here. Flintlock was finally out the door, and the cast was filled with kids in the 9 to 14 range, like You Can't Do That on Television. Music numbers were still a thing, kind of, the kids would lip sync to popular songs, usually with a comedic twist. There weren't any steady adult performers here, but we did get adult celebrity guests, like radio DJ David Hamilton, and a now legally an adult Pauline Quirk, and ooh boy, they are venomously mean to her.
It's my pleasure to introduce one of the really big names in show business. Someone with a large range of talent. A television heavyweight, Miss Pauline Quirk.
Yeah, well, they do say inside every fat girl is a thing.
And they do say that inside every loud-mouthed kid actor, Nigel, there is a jaw that's waiting to be busted.
Oh, Pauline Quirk's weight is still tabloid fodder to this day because the human race is terrible. Actually, the whole show is super mean-spirited, with kids tearing up Smurf toys and, hey, you want some gay jokes from a 70s children's show?
I hate sloppy kisses.
What the thanks I'm going to get? Hiya. Hello. Hi, handsome. Where you been all my life?
What about one of your handsome princes kissing me?
Well, really, brazen hussy.
I always wondered why they called them fairy stories.
Does that kid have a swastika drawn on their face? Holy crap, they do. I get that they're parroting punk rockers and the swastika was kind of a thing in early punk, and that's unfortunate. It's just kind of startling to see it on a kid's show with no comment on some kid's face. But putting aside how utterly unpleasant this program is, its connections to You Can't Do That on Television are pretty obvious. The aesthetic matches, with its kids on an abstract stage, to jokey handwritten credits, to the Monty Python-style cutout animation in the opening. A lot of well-known You Can't Do That on Television sketch scenarios can be seen here. Schoolroom skits, domestic skits, we saw those in the previous two shows too, but here we get a bit more specific, like Old Lady Gets Fresh with a Kid in a Movie Theater.
Please. Oh, you little devil!
Oh, I'm sorry, dearie. It's these fight scenes. They're a bit too much for me. I just can't take all the excitement, you know.
It's okay, just so long as there aren't any love scenes in this movie.
Oh, what do you know? There's one now.
But even more importantly, You Can't Be Serious is where the firing squad skit originates.
Ah, so, gringo, before you are shot, do you have any last request?
Oh, yes, please, David. Could I have Engelbert Humperdinck in the last waltz, please? Thank you.
The boy has no taste. Shoot him.
You Can't Be Serious only ran for one season, and The Tomorrow People was airing its final series in 1979. And at this point, Roger Price decided he was done with British television. So he hopped on a plane, flew across the pond, and landed in Canada, where his children's sketch show idea could find some new fertile ground.
If you watched last week's program like I did, you'll remember the item we had on baton twirling. Well, here in Ottawa, we have a truly localized version of the sport. It's called pin twirling. And with us here today, we have Trevor and Ian to show us how to do this sport. And I just demonstrate for you the basic art twirling form here.
Okay. I should probably explain myself here. Yes, technically speaking, You Can't Do That on Television started in 1979 as local programming in the Ottawa area for CJOH-TV. And all episode guys treat it as the show's first season, which is technically correct. But I feel there are enough differences between this local season and the Nickelodeon seasons that they should be considered separate entities. The nearest comparison I can think of is Mystery Science Theater 3000, whose first season also ran as local programming and was so much different in format and production value that most of the fandom considers that first season an other thing, separate from the canon of the cable version. So that's how I'm going to treat the first season of You Can't Do That on Television, as another draft before the final product. And yes, most of the show's ideas came to life here. Most of the sketch ideas would become finalized here: the dungeon, the preverts, the linking segments in the abstract jungle gym set, water, and, of course, green slime. Though, how the green slime came to be borders on gross negligence.
It was supposed to be sewage, and who knows what it was, just a bucket of slops from the kitchen, probably. But we didn't get round to shooting that scene during the pre-tapes of 1 week, and then it was put off to the next week, and the bucket returned to the props department. It turned green and horrible. And when we came to shoot the scene, at the very last minute we realised that this was not fresh slime. However, time was running out, so down onto the head of poor Tim Douglas, the first kid ever to be slimed, came this obnoxious brew.
We have ways of making you mess. We have ways of making you talk.
Please, sir. I'll tell you everything, sir.
Everything?
Everything.
All right. What is the name of the largest lake in Canada?
The Great Bear Lake.
That is correct. Part 2. For your freedom or the green slime. How many fish in it?
I don't know, sir.
Huh?
Yes, the slime that defined Nickelodeon was because of a bucket of slop that rotted for a week, and they decided to dunk it over a kid's head anyway. Obviously, future versions of the slime were safer to use. This was when some of the kids' bigger names were cast as well. Christine McGlade was on the show from day one, officially becoming the host on the show's second episode after Elizabeth Mitchell, who was originally cast the host, contracted laryngitis. Moose didn't even originally intend to audition for the show. She was on set to support a friend auditioning, and Roger Price wouldn't let her stay unless she auditioned too.
Hi, my name is Christine McGlade, and I'm 15 years old, and my phone number is 824-7922. I'm not really prepared, I don't know what to talk about, so I guess I'll just talk about school in general. School, I like it okay. What can you say about school? Hello?
Oh, project your mind forward and imagine that you're a grandma telling your grandchildren about it.
Okay.
All right? Okay, good. Let's ring off now and let's see you do that.
Pretend I'm a grandmother and tell my grandchildren about it.
That's right, yes.
Okay.
Okay, cute.
Okay. Well, right now I'm a grandmother. I'm 82 years old and I'm sitting in a nice little room in front of the fireplace telling my grandchildren about being on this TV show.
Now, this is why I could never be a casting director. When Price asks her to play the role as an old lady reflecting, Moose doesn't attempt an old lady voice, doesn't attempt any kind of character, and my brain would be going, this kid ain't got it. Obviously, Price thought otherwise, and thank God, because Moose ended up adding so much to the show as the exasperated, put-upon older kid trying to wrangle the young ones. The show also brought in Les Lai, a local comedian best known before then as a double act with Bill Luxton for the kids show Uncle Willie and Floyd, a show that ran for, 22 years, between 1966 and 1988. That's Les Lai playing the bed there.
Sir, excuse me.
Yeah?
What are you doing?
I'm polishing the lens. I've been polishing lenses now for nigh on 40 years. Yeah, I've been polishing television lenses since the silent days.
Lai was tasked with playing all the adult roles, from El Capitan to Barth to Ross, the stage manager who often acted as an antagonizing foil for the kids. This early version of the show included a handful of characters that didn't carry over, most notably Mr. L. Dime, president of CJOH-TV. The behind-the-scenes antics made up for a lot more of the show's contents than it did in the Nickelodeon version, with drama over employee bathrooms and someone turning off the studio's power.
I've finally been able to stop that children's program you hate so much from going on the air. You've done what? I pulled the plug from the studio, sir. They can't broadcast now, sir. What? Give me that.
And that's really only the start of where this version of the show differs from what American audiences were introduced to in 1981. First up, episodes were an hour long and broadcast live, intercutting pre-recorded sketches with live framing segments. This allowed for things like call-in contests where kids could answer trivia questions and win prizes, such as meals at the local Ottawa restaurants.
Come down to CJOH reception or the old spaghetti factory and fill out an entry form. And we'll put all the entry forms in a big box, shake it up, and draw 20 names. And these 20 will be invited to join in our spaghetti eating contest. They'll give different portions to different ages to make it fair. And the winner and the portions given will be decided by the judges. And we're not the judges. The judge is Diane McDonald of the old spaghetti factory.
That was good. What's for dessert?
That's okay. You Can't Do That on Television started as something of a low-key community program, with teachers and community leaders coming on to discuss local events and local artists showing off their work, like cartoonist Jim Unger here. Since this show was only for Ottawa citizens, it could be unapologetically Canadian, though they'd probably apologize for it anyway. The accents on some of these kids are pretty thick, and they even speak French a few times.
Some of us you saw last week, and the rest are all new faces, all from Ottawa, except this one guy who's all the way from Russell, but he doesn't count because he's French. Excuse-moi, Marc, je pensais que mon français n'était pas mal bon, mais j'ai pas compris ce que tu as dit.
So you don't speak frog, eh?
When Nickelodeon picked up the show and started co-producing it, naturally this had to be toned down, which affected cast selections, though the show never completely eliminated its Canadianness. Senator Prevert is much more a parody of Canadian politics than American politics. In Canada, senators are given lifetime appointments instead of being elected and have very limited power compared to US senators, giving off the image of the Senate being more of a lazy gentleman's club than an actual body of government. This lazy, slobbish, middle-aged man being a senator is pretty much in line with other political satire.
Government spend all that money on opera and the ballet. They don't spend none on hockey.
Dad, is the government to blame for almost everything that goes wrong?
Not almost everything that goes wrong. Everything that goes wrong.
Good. Then it's the government's fault they failed all on the subject.
Another feature from Season 1 that didn't make it into Nickelodeon version was local radio personality Jim Johnson, who hosted disco segments where local dancers would come in and strut their stuff. He also offered a lead-in to concert clips for artists like Donna Summer and Billy Joel, and then would discuss these artists with other cast members, often low-key bragging about his connections in the music industry.
I ran into him at the radio station one day. I was just walking through, just taking my time, and here was this little guy, which really surprised me because here was this guy the same height as me.
Oh, that's short.
Yeah, I'm not used to that. He said, "Hi, I'm Andy Gibb." And I said, "Well, I'm Jim Johnson, you're not."
Even now, Roger Price had yet to escape the pop music hole he had dug for himself years ago. But this time, he had a partner in crime. Enter writer and director Jeffrey Darby, who is going to be a major name for Knacks for some time. So yeah, Season 1 of You Can't Do That on Television had all the parts that would make up the Nickelodeon version of the show. It was just a matter of figuring out priorities and trimming the fat. But even then, the recipe wasn't quite right. You Can't Do That on Television wrapped up its first season in May of 1979, but instead of focusing on producing a season 2, attentions turned to taking this local programming and remaking it for a national network, namely CTV, which reached all of Canada. They didn't call it You Can't Do That on Television, presumably for trademark reasons, I'm guessing, because Whatever Turned You On is a horrible title. It sounds like a cheap ripoff of Love American Style, or porno. Whatever Turned You On is pretty much just polished You Can't Do That on Television, a slightly higher budget and better set design. Frankly, some of it looks better than the Nickelodeon stuff afterwards. And of course, no more live content, but a lot of the sketches you know and love continued into this version of the show, and in fact, a good chunk of the sketches were straight up remakes of ones from season 1.
Hi, this is a totally new kind of television program. It's made for ordinary Canadians. What are you doing?
I'm cleaning the lens. Yes, sir, that's my job. I've been cleaning lenses now for nigh on to 40 years. I was cleaning lenses back in the silent days.
Outside of an hour-long pilot, the show was trimmed down to half-hour episodes, and season 1's cast of 22 kids was cut down to an essential 7. Jim Johnston was cut, along with all of his corresponding segments, but Price was still shackled to popular music, with at least one musical performance in each episode from popular Canadian bands like Trooper. It was already clear by this point that they would need to cast a woman to play all of the adult female roles opposite Les Lai, and so Whatever Turned You On brought on Ruth Buzzy, which is not a small name to get. Buzzy was already well known through her work on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, a 60s sketch comedy show that's often cited as an influence for You Can't Do That on Television. Ruth Buzzy was the kind of person you got for The Muppet Show or Dean Martin's Celebrity Roast as a guest. Getting her as a regular for your struggling children's show was quite the catch. Buzzy naturally played the mother roles that Abby Hagyard took over for You Can't Do That on Television, but she expanded into a lot more roles than Hagyard did during her tenure. This included a companion skit to Barth's Burgers, where Buzzy plays a waitress at a cheap diner? Soup kitchen? I'm not sure. And she ends up getting the orders wrong, often taking things way too literally. Whatever Turned You On didn't do well in ratings, largely in part of its time slot. A kids show airing at 7 p.m. on Tuesday nights isn't exactly a great idea. And the show wasn't renewed for a second season. Thankfully, Price and Darby could fall back to Ottawa and keep producing the local version of You Can't Do That on Television, though naturally Buzzy didn't follow them there. And in an alternate timeline, that would be it. You Can't Do That on Television being a local Ottawa hit, and then Roger Price probably moving on to another children's skit show project. But when 1981 rolled around, some small children's cable channel no one had heard of was beginning to take notice.
And finally, a message from our president, Jerry Layburn.
Sometimes when I talk about Nickelodeon, I sound quite serious, and people don't understand how I can run such a fun network. And to their question, I just have to say, I don't know.
For me, there's probably no more important show psychologically for kids than You Can't Do That on Television. It was a real light bulb over my head. We were going to focus groups watching the show, and there was a sigh of relief. We were never making fun of adults. We were making fun of adults who find fun unbearably loathsome. We were making fun of authority figures, such as a father who was completely unfair, or a principal who took the kids down into the dungeon and put them in manacles. Watching this, the kids at home were saying, "Wow, my life's not so bad. So my dad's a little stiff. At least he doesn't act as bad as the dad on You Can't Do That on Television." And there was this recognition that we were trying to build confidence. We were there to say to kids, you know what? There are a lot of funny things that happen in your life, and there are a lot of hard things. And adults will approach these things, and they'll be unfair, and that's gonna happen. But you are not in bad shape, because look at the kids on this show. And it worked. Nickelodeon wasn't a successful channel for years. It was designed to be a loss leader to sell Warner Amex cable packages, and it really lived up to that, earning only a 0.5 in ratings, about as low of a percentage as you can go that's worth recording. Under the leadership of Cy Schneider, the channel was aiming to be a PBS you pay for thing, filled with shows that mirrored PBS programming or just straight up was PBS programming. This earned the channel a reputation as a green vegetable channel, one filled with programming that adults felt were good for kids, but not necessarily programs kids wanted. And then, in 1981, two shows came into Nickelodeon's orbit that didn't really fit the aesthetic, both from the same oddball British creator, Roger Damon Price. The first was The Tomorrow People, a admittedly corny science fiction action show for teens that positioned itself as anti-authoritarian. And the other was You Can't Do That on Television, a Canadian children's sketch show where kids maneuver a world of bumbling adults while getting very, very messy. Consider this. Take in the shows we've covered up to this point. For a channel devoted to children, it's surprising how few of these shows were actually children-led, or even had children in them at all. Pinwheel took a lot of its format from Sesame Street, with people and puppets cohabiting in the same place, but unlike Sesame Street, there's no human children present. They're just not there. There's no children in Dusty's Treehouse, or Hocus Focus, or Nickel Flicks, or Video Comics, or What Will They Think of Next, or Pop Clips. Children's classics featured stories with child protagonists, but not exclusively. Kids' Rights took the Children Write in Stories format from PBS's Zoom and swapped out that show's child cast for a bunch of 32-year-olds. On the flip side, you had America Goes Bananas and its spiritual successor Livewire that featured live discussions with children on hefty topics without eliminating the fun factor. Reggie Jackson's World of Sports profiled young athletes. Vegetable Soup had actual child actors doing the voice of their child puppet characters in the Outer Scope 1 segments, and there was First Row Features, hour-long films that starred children and were actually designed with children in mind. The Adventures in Rainbow County and Matt and Jenny also had child protagonists, but both shows were about these young characters deferring to adult authority figures. The grown-ups know best. And of course you had Studio C, where kids sent in segment suggestions, gave interviews, and wrote poetry. Though I argue they overcorrected in this. None of this is a value judgment, by the way. None of these shows are better or worse for having a child presence, but taking it in as an overall pattern shows a channel where letting kids see themselves in the programming wasn't a high priority. And then along comes Roger Price to stick a pin in it. The exact decision that allowed these two shows on Nickelodeon isn't documented, but something to consider was that at this time, Cy Schneider might have been the president of Nickelodeon and the one with the final say on everything, but the actual programming manager was Geraldine Laybourne, who had previously been an elementary school teacher and was very interested in crafting something that children would want. The head guy was very much in control. Everybody reported directly to him. There were no group meetings, so you never knew what anyone else was doing. He kept all the information to himself because he believed that information was power, and he didn't want to share any of that power. And he made sure that everyone knew that he was in control of all the decision making. Schneider had the typical broadcast mentality. That is, he basically assumed he could feed his audience whatever he wanted. There was little interest in trying to figure out what kids were interested in, what would appeal to them. One of the reasons this era of Nickelodeon is so hard to suss out is because there were no group communications going on in the company. It was all a one-way street to Schneider's office. So really, who knows why You Can't Do That on Television ended up in the green vegetable period of Nickelodeon. But I do know that Laybourne would champion the show as the years went on, and used it to shape the channel when she took over as president in 1984. I immediately set up a focus group for You Can't Do That on Television, and it taught me a lot about focus groups. This focus group leader hated the show. She thought it was disrespectful and hideous. So when I arrived at the focus group, she said, "Well, I'll do the best I can, but it's a terrible show." Everything she did with the kids in the room was to get them to say negative things. And we came back with a very negative report because one of the kids was kind of a bully and it wasn't cool enough for him. So then all of the kids heaped on. but they knew every character and they knew every line of dialogue. And I knew they loved the show, but they just weren't saying it.
Well, I think Nickelodeon came out of working with these kids. Basically, what I learned from working with these kids is that they will lead the way. All you have to do is listen and provide a rich environment where they can be creative. And if you ask kids and involve them in the process, you get a much better product in the end. So the first show that we did, You Can't Do That on Television, it was really successful, was because it was based on the psychology of where kids are. And I often say it's the most psychologically important show ever done for kids, which horrifies most people because You Can't Do That on Television slimed kids and, had kids in dungeons. But what was so great about it was it convinced kids that we knew that they're all in the same boat, that they basically all deal with unfair authority figures at some time in their life, and that we weren't taking a swipe at parents. We were taking a swipe at bad parental behavior or bad teacherly behavior. And because the parents on You Can't Do That on Television and the teachers and the principals were so much worse than anybody's parents could ever be, the kid at home ended up feeling better about, oh, it's not so bad for me. I'm doing fine.
However it shaked out, Nickelodeon picked up the show, and kids noticed how different it was right away. It soon became the ratings leader for the channel. Even Pinwheel, Nickelodeon's big headliner, couldn't hold a candle to You Can't Do That on Television. Did Cy Schneider learn anything from this? Of course not. He just continued on with his PBS You Pay For plan. Episodes for Season 2 of You Can't Do That on Television were still an hour long, which Nickelodeon edited down to a half hour for their broadcasts. Season 2 was also when the episode themes got their proper start, with episodes on things like dating, fitness, hygiene, and smoking. That last one is notable because of all the smoking Leslie had to do with his various characters. There's more smoking in this episode than an entire season of Mad Men, and the episode ends with this out-of-character bit of just how gross it was for Lai.
I want to make a commendation and give a special medal for bravery to Les Lai, who plays all the adults on the show, and who this week made a supreme sacrifice, all in the cause of art, by smoking all those cigarettes, because Les doesn't smoke cigarettes. Les, if you can speak, what do you have to say?
Sorry. Actually, I thought it was rather gross. I can't believe that people actually pay to smoke cigarettes, and I will never do it again.
Episode theming is really the key to this finalized version of the show, good old Draft 6. It tightened up the writing, giving the skits more focus. No longer, hey, just write some firing squad skits about whatever, but instead, hey, write some firing squad skits about nutrition, which is much more conducive to creativity.
Ready, aim.
Wait a minute, what are you going to shoot me for anyway?
To teach you a lesson. To teach you that it's bad for you to eat this junk food.
Well, if you shoot me, it won't exactly be good for my health. As a matter of fact, it'll be very bad for it.
Yeah, but if we shoot you, then you can't eat any more of this junk food.
That's not.
No, of course you can. And if you can't eat any more of the junk food, it will be good for your health.
Here, have a check.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Amigos, ready, aim. I don't feel so good. I feel sick. Now you see what eating junk food will do to your health?
But more than that, it meant that the show was having an active discussion with its young audience. Here are these kids who look like the audience and talk like the audience, and they're looking into the camera and saying, yes, the real world is weird and hard to understand. Let's try to comprehend some of it with comedy. It feels like an authentic dialogue with the actual kid. In fact, one of the kids actually ended up in the writer's room, Adam Reed, who joined the cast in 1984 and left in 1987. and joined the writer's room alongside Price for the show's 1989 season. In season 3, the show cast theater actor and stand-up comedian Abby Hagyard to take on the adult female roles, which mostly meant playing Mrs. Prevert, a not-too-bright housewife always wearing her yellow kitchen gloves, a mockery of 1950s domestic life.
You told me,
Oh, Kevin, there you are at it again. You know, sometimes I think you think more of that television set than you do of your poor, crippled little sister.
Don't be ridiculous, Mom. Of course I think of Vanessa.
Fire! Fire! Save everybody!
Oh, dear. That's right, the knitting dear. I'll be right back.
And with her casting, You Can't Do That on Television finally settled into the show 80s Nick fans all know and love. But again, this was still Schneider, and just because the show was the most popular thing on the channel didn't mean the channel was going to exist in a year's time. Even now, after having made 6 versions of the same idea and selling that idea to 3 different countries, Roger Price was still in survival mode.
Didn't you see the show last week?
Are you crazy? Me watch public television?
So you didn't see the part where Tina got yellow yucked?
What's yellow yucked?
So you haven't read today's script yet?
No, they didn't give it to me until after I was on the air.
So you don't know if you get yellow yucked or not?
No, imagine giving me a script after I'm already on the air.
Do you know your lines?
No, so if I make a mistake, don't blame me, because I don't know what this is. What's this?
Yellow yuck.
Yes, You Can't Do That on Television isn't even the final draft of You Can't Do That on Television. Worried about Nickelodeon's continued longevity, Roger Price and his now partner in crime, Jeffrey Darby, took the concept to, of all places, PBS. Don't Look Now more closely resembles the CJOH version of the show, an hour-long, broadcast live with music videos and call-in contests. Call-in contests where you have to call collect, because I guess a 1-800 number wasn't in the show's budget. But even if you're only familiar with the Nickelodeon version, You Can't Do That on Television's DNA is all over Don't Look Now, like a gruesome crime scene.
Dylan. Yes, Lisa? Did I ever tell you that you remind me of the ocean? You are wild and romantic?
No, you make me sick.
Hey, Paul. Yeah, Tina? Do you know what the most common speech impediment is in American children?
No.
Bubble gum.
Pretty much everything on Don't Look Now had an analog to the show before it, with just enough of the serial numbers scratched off. The firing squad skits became walking the plank of a pirate ship.
You walk the plank. Ha ha.
Ow! Ah!
Oh, come on with you. What's wrong now?
Got a nail in my foot.
Don't be stupid. There are no nails in my plank.
Oh, yeah? What's this?
So it is a nail. Get off of there. Let me check to see if there are any more nails. Here, hold me, Cuckers.
Little one out.
Now it seems pretty clear of nails to me.
Well, why don't you look towards the edge?
Oh, look. Here there is a nail. Ah!
Barth's Burgers became a summer camp canteen.
Boy, am I ever hungry. I think all the fresh air is giving me an appetite.
Yeah, and the smell in there is taking it away again.
Shut up and eat, Tina.
Does this show have green slime? No, but it does have yellow yuck.
Jocelyn! No, my father's gonna kill me for spending his money.
You got us into this mess, so you get us out.
Just because it cost more than we made, don't blame me. Oh, no, come on, people, please. Oh, what? This is definitely not fair.
I suppose in isolation, Don't Look Now is fine, but even with a smidgen of context, the entire thing feels like highly processed food. Reportedly, the show did receive some great ratings, even better than its Nickelodeon counterpart since, you didn't need a cable box to watch it, but it only lasted 5 episodes through October 1983. The reported reason for the show's failure was that parents called in and complained that this wasn't appropriate television for PBS. And, well, yeah. Don't Look Now didn't fit in with PBS pretty much for the same reasons that You Can't Do That on Television didn't fit in with Cy Schneider's Nickelodeon. It was messy humor that snubbed its nose at adults, played popular music like MTV, and openly mocked PBS live on the air.
You see, the people at public television, their brains have finally turned into mush. They've got me and a bunch of other kids to make this show. Worse, the show is live, so when we make a mistake, everyone will get to see it.
Don't worry your pretty little head, Dylan. No one's gonna see any mistake we make.
Why not?
This is public television. No one's watching anyway.
Not even my mother?
Does she love you?
Yes.
Then she's not watching.
Don't Look Now doesn't have the episode theming of the Nickelodeon show, so that sense of quirky discussions between the show and the audience isn't really there, instead relying just on undisciplined gags, which result in things like a wet t-shirt joke in a kid's show, performed by kids.
The reason we're going live is so that you, the viewer at home, can call up the studio and by answering a simple question win a Don't Look Now t-shirt, just like the one I'm wearing. What did you do that for?
Well, I thought you'd look better in a wet t-shirt. But then again...
Even now, Roger Price had some mean-spirited humor that didn't mesh well on the Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers channel. Speaking of, according to Price, Mr. Rogers hated You Can't Do That on Television, which Price kind of wore as a badge of honor. There's no quote from Fred Rogers himself, but I believe it. Rogers was always super critical of television and its effect on children, and strongly disliked pie-in-the-face style humor. If Fred Rogers ever had one flaw, it's probably that he was too narrow-minded when it came to acceptable children's television. But Roger Price, maybe, just maybe, Mr. Rogers didn't like your work because you made a 12-year-old girl the butt of a wet t-shirt joke on the same channel as him. The girl, by the way, is Lisa Rossman. She's a film critic now. She's pretty cool.
All right, boys, we're gonna get you guys doing dress like that. You got a game in 5 minutes. Come on now, change. You look like a bunch of cheerleaders.
Well, we aren't. This is the latest craze. Didn't you know that you were going to be coaching the cheerleaders?
Me? Coaching the cheerleaders? Oh, no, why is it always me?
Accounts on how things ran behind the camera vary quite a bit depending on who you're asking. For example, I've never heard Christine Moose McGlade say a bad thing about the production, despite her on-screen persona being the subject of so many body-shaming jokes.
Eugene, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a vet and take care of sick dogs.
Well, here's your chance to practice. Here comes Christine.
The kids were heavily chaperoned. There was always women on set to make sure things were on the up and up. Roger made sure there was always a female chaperone on set. She was a trained therapist and a lovely woman. She happened to be the mother of 2 of the boys who had already gotten cast on the show. And if Leslie wasn't around, I was around. We had the makeup woman, Carol Hay, Jeff Darby. There was no situation, to my knowledge, where the kids might have been taken advantage of. As the ACTRA rep, it was my job to make sure the kids were being treated in accordance with the rules that spelled out the manner in which they were kept safe, not overworked, not being exploited in any way, treated well, and not making a nuisance of themselves. Yeah, that's certainly reassuring to hear. And there definitely wasn't any exploitation, like in terms of child labor and stuff. The kids were paid well, they weren't taken out of school, and they weren't in any physical danger. As for the body-shaming humor, yeah, that's pretty shitty. I say that at the risk of a bunch of 40-year-olds in the audience whining about how society's gotten too politically correct. But humor in general does tend to age poorly, and while I won't not call out shitty, girl, you ugly jokes, I don't want to get too bent out of shape about it. But let's not pretend putting the bodies of young people through puberty on television for hundreds of thousands of people to see and laugh at doesn't have any kind of effect on the kids in the cast. I had one sketch that dug at me. It was Mom and me at the back porch, and I said,
Mom, I refuse to go to school wearing this stupid jacket. All the other kids will laugh at me.
Well, all right. I suppose it's okay. It is warm enough not to wear a jacket.
Okay, and this shirt.
What?
Yeah, this shirt makes me look like a girl. I'm not going to wear this stupid shirt to school.
Madam, your grandmother gave you that shirt.
These pants.
What about the pants?
Well, these pants look stupid. There's no way I'm wearing these pants to school.
I knitted those pants for you, personally, myself, for Christmas. They were very special pants.
Okay.
You cannot go to school without any clothes on, Adam.
Well, Mom, I'm not going to argue with that. If you say I can't go to school, then fine by me.
Come out here.
But to strip down to your underwear as a prepubescent boy and doing it 4 or 5 times? Everyone's very respectful and it's a kids show and everyone's having fun, but there's still a part of me. I felt pretty vulnerable. Brenda Mason came up to me afterward and put her arm around me and said, "That was really good. Are you okay?" And I was sucking back tears. So yeah, a positive, protective work environment for the kids with maybe some misguided humor. Could be better, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Except, well, these aren't really the only accounts. Other accounts suggest that the set of You Can't Do That on Television was a bit of a boys' club, where the young male members of the cast were given certain allowances, and nudie magazines were everywhere.
While they were setting up lights and stuff, we'd end up talking or reading books, and Les would often have a magazine, and I saw Chris and Ted and Christian, again, sort of huddled around Les, and I'm wondering, what book do you have, what magazine do you have? And look, they're looking at Playboy. Okay, kids, shut their ears. And I freaked, and it was a completely different world for me.
The crew on You Can't Do That on Television introduced me to pornography. Playboy was always lying around. Also, peepholes.
A few little things. We were changing in the change room. Do you remember? And the guys opened up the tiles above, and we didn't know about it. And I think it was Ted and Christian, and maybe Carlos was involved. Anyways, and we were changing, and I said, "What is that noise?" And I know you were there, but I actually had my shirt off. And then I quickly put it on, and I looked up in the corner, and sure enough, there's Ted and Christian. And they're watching us girls change. And we didn't know how long this had gone on, like 2 days. And so when we went and complained to Jane, who was Matthew and Ammius Godfrey's mom, who would watch us and chaperone us quite a bit. And she was absolutely abhorred that the guys were checking out the girls. And she went and told Roger, and Roger goes, boys will be boys. And I was 12 years old. I was so shy. Like, they were looking at me naked. I was freaking out.
This is not a good thing. This is god-awful behavior that should be stopped immediately with consequences, not shrugged off with a glib, "Boys will be boys." This is only going to encourage that behavior further, at the detriment of the girls on the cast. You are saying that a woman's privacy and sense of safety isn't worth anything because boys are gonna be boys and they're gonna do whatever. Roger Price just wasn't as good to girls as he was to boys. Maybe not monstrously so, but measurably so. In fact, I think there's a case to be made of Roger Price being very insecure with masculinity and seeing femininity as something of a threat to it, and that teenage boys leering in on girls changing affirmed masculinity, i.e. strong, heterosexual sex drives, and thus wasn't all that bothered about it. Boys will be boys. And I say this because, well, look, we need to talk about the dress. Cross-dressing humor is nothing new, and unless someone's got a particularly interesting twist on it, it tends to be a pretty lazy joke. The humor is derived from the cultural idea that a man is somehow degraded by wearing women's clothing and makeup, that they are lesser for taking on feminine characteristics. Women wearing men's clothes used to have a similar taboo edge to it, but almost never because it was funny, but because a woman taking on masculine characteristics was seen as challenging. It just isn't done. Nowadays, of course, a woman wearing pants is an everyday thing. We have decided that masculine clothes on a woman is perfectly fine, because masculinity is perfectly fine. But we still stop and stare and point and laugh if a man is seen wearing a dress, which is harmful. It's harmful to transgender women. It's harmful to any man who dares express feminine traits. It tells us that femininity is a bad thing to the male sex, and that can be internalized and expressed with slurs, discrimination, and sometimes even violence. But it's also commonplace, and so seeing a few boy-in-dress gags on You Can't Do That on television wasn't really a surprise. I just shrugged it off as a dumb joke and didn't think about it again. But then I watched the rest of Roger Price's television work. All those sketch comedy shows aimed at children, the 7 drafts, and found a pattern that caught me off guard. A pattern that was only further emphasized as I did research for this episode. I'll just say it. Roger Price likes to put young boys in dresses, and it's fucking creepy.
But he's very firm in his ideas about school uniform, so I don't suppose you'll have much luck. There's no more time for class discussion. We should all get along to our next classes.
It's very good of you to offer to help with my homework tonight, Tommy.
Didn't say the question. Kill him.
Stand still. Oh, hold on, don't move.
You can't let anyone in.
Funny, Nigel.
But he can't see me like this. No, I'll kill you.
Stop or I'll shoot. And put it in the school notice board, so stay there.
Git.
Come on now, otherwise we'll miss the start of the movie.
Right, Nigel.
Oh, how'd you get how'd you get out of this?
To help me with my homework, Tim.
You never told me it was your dressmaking homework.
No. Hang on, don't move.
Hey, wait a minute. You can't let anybody in here. Not like...
Oh, David.
Stand still or I'll shoot. And then I'm going to put it on a school bulletin board.
No, David. We don't want to do anything that we might regret later now.
Come on, Cindy. Let's go to the movies.
Right.
Hey, wait a minute. How am I supposed to get out of this thing?
Don't move. You follow the base thing.
Oh, care about the base thing. Let me have a turbo.
They better not try and get me in a dress on this show, or I'll tell Monsieur Levesque. Anyway, here's Jim Johnson.
I think you'd look mighty fine in a dress, sir.
Aw, get lost.
A few lessons in between.
Going anywhere. Look, get me out of this thing.
Listen, stand up there like a man. Or a woman.
Monstrosity.
Okay, Tim. Class is in session here. Let's see how we're supposed to be able to twirl these things.
That's not the way to say thank you. A nice girl would curtsy.
I'm not a girl, and I don't know how to curtsy.
Oh, well, come over to my house and I'll teach you. You look very cute in that dress. Brings out my motherly instincts.
Trash.
You know, I think he's getting used to that dress.
Starting a commercial for glitter soap pads.
Right now, we are looking for another Shirley Temple.
No! Come here. Take your foot. Oh, yes, oh, Mom, that hurts. Take your foot. Oh, Mom, I don't want to do that. No, take it. On the good ship, lollipop, it's a nice trip.
Stand still and stop fidgeting.
But, Mom...
No buts, John. The note from the principal was quite specific. It said your dress had to be neater, and this is the neatest dress that I could possibly find. Now, hurry, or you're going to...
But, Mom...
No buts, dear. Hurry down, or you're going to be late again. Oh, John, wait a minute, dear. You forgot your Mary Jane.
A dress? My friends are never going to let me live this down.
I thought it was a very pretty dress, John.
You would. You're a girl.
Exactly, and I can't wait until the next time you have to wear it.
Next time? What next time?
You ought to know better than to wear a dress on a ship full of sailors.
Don't worry, I'll be glad to walk the plank. I'll never be able to face the kids at school tomorrow.
Enjoy, sharkies.
Well, Jocelyn, what do you think?
I think kids have the right to express their own opinions. And if they like this show, then they should tell people.
Oh, no. What do you think of the dress? How do you like it?
It doesn't suit you, Matt. And it's ugly. I would change my dress designer if I were you.
You mean you don't want to buy this dress off me?
Heavens, no! I wouldn't even dress my least favorite dog in that rag.
You mean I got myself into this dress and made a fool out of myself in front of nationwide television for nothing? Sure looks that way.
When I was a boy, I wouldn't have been found dead wearing a skirt.
It's not a skirt, it's a kilt. And then when you were a boy, probably all you had to wear was dinosaur skin.
Well, I suppose you boys think you're tough coming to school dressed like that. Well, for your sake, I hope you are.
Come on, Coach. Do we really have to wear this stupid getup? We're gonna get laughed off the football field.
We gotta, as long as we're taking that grant from the Department of Culture and Recreation.
I just hope Dad doesn't see me dressed like this.
I come in?
Oh, no, it's Dad.
Oh, look at this. Poor Wyatt. Oh, Vanessa. Tell me, when you females decide that you're going to make a new dress, why is it that you have to put Wyatt into it and he looks like a sissy while you're messing around?
No, Dad. You got it all wrong. This dress isn't for me. It's for Wyatt. He wants to look like Boy George.
Oh, well, that's all. Oh, no.
You know, Alistair, it is true that in houses across the nation right now, role reversal is taking place.
Well, Christine, I never really did understand role reversal.
Oh, well, that's, like when the man stays at home and looks after the kids and the woman goes out and earns a living for the family. It's like me wearing these pants and you wearing that skirt.
That what? I wasn't wearing a skirt.
Oh, no, relax. It's just a special effect to introduce the opposites.
But how'd they do it? I wasn't wearing a skirt. I had pants on, I swear. Okay, the opposites are over now. Get me out of this stupid skirt.
We do have this extra pair of pants hanging around.
Okay, then give them to me, quick.
Give, never. Sell, maybe.
Back to reality. This is all I've got. I left my purse at home.
And no, this is not limited to just Roger Price's comedy shows. It shows up in some form or another in both of his versions of the Tomorrow People as well.
Hello, Scotland. Oh, shut up. Presenting Stephen to a new school, Chris.
Dressed like this? You wouldn't last 5 minutes. Not any school I know, anyway.
It's a special school, Chris.
It would have to be. It's no you than me.
You're not wearing anything underneath, are you?
You what?
You're not wearing anything underneath.
Why?
It's against the rules. If you are, I suggest you get them off before the doctor catches you.
Megabyte, I'm going to kill you.
Oh, come on. Flowers look good on you.
The only Roger Price joints I didn't find a boy in a dress or skirt was You Must Be Joking and Turkey Television, but I also don't have all the episodes of those shows, so who knows. But okay, you might be saying, maybe Roger Price isn't a very creative writer and draws from the same wells over and over again. Except this boy in dress thing was used as a bizarre threat behind the scenes.
Les Lie never spoke down to us. He treated us, like another actor on the set, and Jeff Darby and Roger Price again. Roger liked to put the guys in dresses, but other than that, very often, especially in the first season, if the guys were getting out of hand, he said, "Listen, next episode you're going to be in a dress," and that was a fate worse than death. So it pretty well kept everybody under control.
Roger loved seeing little boys in dresses. He thought it was hilarious, but the boys didn't like it so much. He'd pick the boy who least wanted to be in a dress and make him wear it. 5 or 6 of us went down to LA with Roger as kind of a field trip. Roger had found out that Doug Tolmie and Matthew Godfrey had gotten into a fight. It was Doug being Doug, a bit of a bully. But instead of punishing Doug, Roger said, "Let's go to a woman's department store." We all walked in, and Roger said, "Doug, pick your dress. Matthew, pick your dress." And they spent the rest of the afternoon in dresses as a joint punishment. Through that, Matthew and Doug bonded to an extent. They made it through the rest of the trip together, and got along. Putting boys in dresses was a means of punishment, of embarrassing the boys under his care. Femininity as a threat, one that Price got some sadistic glee out of. And it's not like he ever went nuh-uh when questioned about it. People do horrible things to kids and make them wear dresses in real life too. I went to a German school for boys in Switzerland. It was a nice school. Our service duty mom used to tell us what to wear, brush our hair, bathe us, scrub us 3 times a day in a tub, make sure we did our homework, and pull down our pants and smack our butts occasionally. She kept a dress, a sort of a hideous Heidi outfit for bad boys to wear. If she was displeased with you, you found it on your bed. I found it on my bed a couple of times, but I never wore it. You always promised to be good in the future, and she always relented. So, I'm not a psychiatrist, but that sure as hell sounds like a man playing out his childhood traumas on the children under his employ. It's so weird to see all this stuff and nobody say what needs to be said about it. It's in this documentary from 2004, it's in this book from 2013, but nobody seems to be willing to say that this is fucked up. Well, if you want something done, I guess you have to do it yourself. It's a bad enough joke on its own, but to repeat the joke over and over again in all of your work, to cast femininity as something to be mocked, to fat shame skinny teenage girls and shrug off boys peeping into girls' locker rooms as no big deal, to make a dress a symbol of utter humiliation, to force children to wear these clothes against their wills on television and in public streets because you were threatened with a dress as a child. This is fucked up.
You know, there's so many shows out there that are pushing or peddling products, you know, hawking something or other, you know. Every show, pretty much to make a cartoon nowadays, you have to have a video game and a plush toy to go with it. You know, and that was the other beauty of You Can't, was we're not trying to sell anything. Well, now they do. They sell green slime shampoo and stuff like that. I mean, they did sort of in a very small kind of way. I mean...
So this is my favorite clip from the 2004 documentary You Can't Do That on Film. You can just see the gears turn in Adam Reed's head as he talks. Well, our show didn't sell merchandise. Wait, 1 second, rebooting. Our show sold merchandise. Oh my god, we are part of the capitalist system. Nickelodeon didn't fail, obviously, and that was largely in part to Geraldine Laybourne taking over as president of the channel in 1984 and restructuring the entire thing. We have plenty of time to get into the nitty-gritty on that, but one thing Laybourne knew the channel needed was a fresh image. A new logo, a new visual identity. There was somebody floating around Warner Amex who could help with that. Enter Fred Siebert. We've seen Siebert before. He was on staff for Star Channel, but for the last couple of years, Siebert had been making a name for himself as the first creative director of Nickelodeon's sister channel, MTV, where he created the channel's many animated commercials and station IDs. He's the I want my MTV guy. With partner Alan Goodman, Siebert formed the company Fred Allen Incorporated and started working on other channels. And in 1985, that brought him to Nickelodeon.
We went into Nickelodeon, and the people who ran it, a lot of people had been fired because it was failing. And they had one show that got a rating, which is a show from Canada called You Can't Do That on Television. It's where the whole idea of slime originated in that show. Like randomly, what was the phrase? I don't know. They would say, I don't know, and slime would fall down on their head, and that's how that whole thing sort of started. And they said, you know, we think that the rest of our shows should be like this too, because the thing that we keep finding out is we keep telling kids that we're fun, but we're really not, except for this show. And that's the reason that show got the rating and everything else got zeros. Again,
I won't get into the fine details on how Siebert designed Nickelodeon's new image. There's plenty of time for that. But the point for right now is that You Can't Do That on Television was the springboard for Nickelodeon's new image. Green slime turned into the orange splat, and the show's messy nature seeped into Nickelodeon's other programs, up to today. Nickelodeon didn't get super hardcore into the merchandising game until the 1990s, but they did do some stuff in the 80s, including their very first slime product.
Hey, what's your favorite TV show?
You can't do that on television.
Well, what's your favorite shampoo?
I don't know.
Introducing You Can't Do That on Television Green Slime Shampoo. It gets you clean, it won't turn you green. It looks like green slime, but with one big difference. It's shampoo. Just say those 3 little words.
I don't know.
and go from stringy, slimy hair to silky, shiny hair. It's amazing that something that looks so terrible leaves your hair so clean and great looking. You get an 8-ounce bottle of green slime shampoo. Plus, as an introductory TV offer, you get an 8-ounce bottle of green slime liquid soap, all for only $6.95.
An 8-ounce bottle? You know kids are going to be dumping that stuff on their heads to emulate the show, right? That entire bottle is going to be gone in like one shower. Oh, wait, no, that was probably the idea. You gotta keep buying it. Sneaky, sneaky. But yes, the predecessor of GAC, the You Can't Do That on Television shampoo. But it wasn't just shampoo that the show was selling. And I think this is something a lot of commercial artists struggle with. It was very easy to see the commercial nature of many children's programming in the 1980s. The explosion of kids' shows made just to sell toys was dominating the landscape. When you're not being that blatant about it, it's easy to say that your show doesn't sell something. Except you're always selling at least one thing. The platform. The platform is your merchandise. Film festivals are the merchandise of the independent movie. Art museums are the merchandise of painting and sculptures. YouTube is the merchandise for silly web videos about television history. You, my audience, were looking for content that I put on YouTube and therefore came to YouTube. I sold you YouTube. And Nickelodeon was the merchandise for You Can't Do That on Television. Nickelodeon was what they were selling.
You Can't Do That on Television will be back after this.
It does kind of feel backwards, doesn't it? Surely the show is the product, not the channel. And that's also true in a way, but did you give the show your money? Did you write a check to Roger Price? Did you subscribe to Jeffrey Darby's Patreon account? No, you paid the cable company. You paid Warner Amax or Viacom. You paid for Nickelodeon. You Can't Do That on Television sold Nickelodeon, more so than any show until Double Dare. That's why Nickelodeon aired it. And it sold Nickelodeon so well that it became the blueprint of how the channel would carry itself for the years ahead. However, the more things it took from You Can't Do That on Television, the less it needed You Can't Do That on Television. Time moved on, Entropy did its work, and the show's young cast got older. Moose was already 15 when she was cast in 1979, and was still playing the kid role in her early 20s. For season 6 in 1985, Alasdair Gillis took the role of co-host to help transition things for Moose's departure 5 episodes into season 7, after which Gillis became the full-time host, except he also left the show near the end of season 7. 1987 was the year You Can't Do That on Television died, despite the fact that it ran for 2 more seasons afterwards. Everyone in the original cast besides Les Lai was gone. Most of the second wave of cast members was gone. Jeffrey Darby had left the writer's room to work on other projects for Nickelodeon, and a lot of the early episodes were being taken out of the rerun circulation. What's more, season 8 featured the show's one and only banned episode, the adoption episode.
Today's child is Vanessa. Vanessa can be a smiling, friendly girl if you approach her correctly. Vanessa has few defects, apart from squinty eyes, crooked teeth, bad breath, and practically no chin at all. If you would like to adopt Vanessa, call 555-KIDS. That's 555-KIDS. We'll even give you a paper bag to take her home in.
I've seen worse. But I know that Nickelodeon was trying to curate its image at this point, fine-tuning the formula, and making a bunch of jokes about kids without parents could alienate a portion of the audience. But by this point, the show was pulling back from being an open dialogue like before. For example, early on the show had these kid on the street segments, where young people were asked about the subject of the episode. That stopped happening, which just leaves the "this girl is ugly" jokes. At first, Nickelodeon decided not to renew the show after its 8th season, and no episodes were produced from 1988. When Price managed to change some minds and get a 9th season produced, only 2 previous child cast members returned, bringing in a batch of all new kids, so if you were a longtime fan of the show, suddenly everyone you'd grown to know and love was gone, just like that. Might just feel a little bit alienating. Actually, didn't that same thing more or less happen to All That? I guess that's one lesson Nickelodeon didn't learn. The show never really regained its momentum after that. Nickelodeon was coming to rely more on their own original programming and were looking into opening their own production studio in Florida, and the show was deemed no longer profitable by the station. A brief 5-episode season 10 aired in 1990, and after 11 years, production on You Can't Do That on Television came to a close. Sparse weekend reruns ran as late as 1994, and once in a blue moon an episode might play for a Nickelodeon nostalgic revival. The channel has never really forgotten its first true success, but its place in Nickelodeon was officially over.
Suckers, a fool and his money is soon parted. No refunds. Absolutely no refunds. If you kids want to waste your good money on a dumb tape like this, you get whatever you deserve.
We've been waiting on a proper home video release of You Can't Do That on Television for a long, long time. There was a compilation VHS in the 80s, but since then, struggles with who owns the rights and how residuals should work have kept us from having any releases beyond a few temporary half measures. There were a few episodes on iTunes, not anymore. There were a few episodes on Amazon, not anymore. There's a lot of clips on YouTube, most of them hosted by the Truly Horrible Entertainment YouTube channel, or THE. THE is Roger Price's current company, running out of Ottawa, though last I heard, Price was living in France. Hey Jeffrey Darby, why is Roger Price in France?
Do you know why he lives in the French countryside? He's a tax exile. Anyway, he put together... That's not a joke, it's true.
If you read the description on THE's YouTube videos, you find a lot of variants of, "We own the rights, if you think you own the rights, come at us, bro," which leads me to believe that there's something funky going on with the rights right now. And THE is protective of the show. Super protective. In fact, after I did the Knacks episode on the Tomorrow People, THE emailed me saying, "Roger has come by your video and thought it was very well done," which is odd, as that was a pretty negative video. Now we understand you have a You Can't Do That on Television episode coming out. This Roger Price has requested to view it before you release it. First off, great grammar, guys. Second, I really doubt Roger Price would approve of a video about how he likes to put little boys in dresses. Third, as much as I'd love to get into the archives and get all sides of the story and interview Roger Price himself, I don't answer to you guys. THE has this whole aura of insecurity, and I would suggest you guys download this video in case they try to play the copyright strike game. SlimeCon, the official You Can't Do That on Television convention, has been going off and on since 2002, and cast and crew have been doing Q&As on the regular for the last 2 decades. In 2004, a documentary on the show, You Can't Do That on Film, was produced, as was an unofficial new episode of the show starring some of the now grown-up cast members. The show got a lot of focus for the book Slimed, An Oral History of Nickelodeon's Golden Age in 2013, and Abby Hagyard published her own book of interviews with the show's cast and crew in 2016, called Fame, the Collector's Edition. Rumors of a reboot have been circulating on the internet for years. You Can't Do That on Television still has a pulse, if a faint one, but if you actually want to watch the show, the only options available to you at the moment are bootleg DVDs and file sharing. It could possibly be one of the most beloved shows that you still have to pirate. At least all the episodes are available. You Can't Do That on Television is one of those shows where you really can't run out of things to say. This is the longest episode of Knacks by far, and will probably remain the longest until at least Double Dare. But I could have easily made this video twice as long, 3 times as long, talking about the evolution of the cast, production values, the show's international success, the cast trip to the White House, what everybody did after the show. But I decided I want to focus on some of the things that the traditional retrospectives leave out, and that meant showing off some of the show's uglier sides. Knacks isn't a nostalgia show. It's a history show. And with most things in history, there are uglier sides. None of that invalidates how much you loved the show as a kid, how fuzzy you feel when you watch old episodes, and if it still gives you a good hearty chuckle, that's great. You Can't Do That on Television was an important show. It saved a struggling cable channel, giving them their first big hit and offering a roadmap that would lead them to success. You Can't Do That on Television was an interesting show, the best version of an artistic passion for a weird, off-kilter writer. You Can't Do That on Television was, more often than not, a good show. One that was funny and subversive and had something to offer a young audience. But it was a commercial product. Elements of it haven't aged well, and things weren't all that great behind the scenes. It can be all those things. The world is allowed to be complicated and problematic and wonderful and sad and comforting and troubling all at the same time. And I feel like that's something the show would agree with. You Can't Do That on Television is about how the world just doesn't make a lot of sense, how cruelty is absurd and growing up is abstract, where not knowing something will get you covered in slime, which is fun, but knowing something means you have to deal with it, as unpleasant as it might be.
You Can't Do That on Television has been a reason for inventing television production. The guys who invented TV, if they ever saw this show, they'd die knowing that they'd wasted their lives.